So, frame data. If you're just starting out, maybe you've heard about it. Maybe you've been told about how important it is. Well, I'll tell you that at the very least, it can be an incredibly powerful tool in your toolbox. But if you don't know where to begin learning about frame data, I've made this video just for that purpose. This is just going to be a quick and dirty guide. I won't go over everything or the super technical aspects of it, but hopefully it'll be enough to get you started. What I will say is that frames are a handy way to express time in fighting games. Fighting games, and some party games, run at 60 frames per second, and so we can use them to describe the passage of time, and to also describe the time relation between characters, which will hopefully start to make sense as we go through this guide. Now, if you've heard of frame data, maybe you've also heard of frame data apps. For Street Fighter 6, there's an app called FA Tool or FAT or FAT or whatever, and you can use it by either going to fullmeter.com and using the web app, or you can download the phone app for use at tournaments or locals or whatever. If you open up FA Tool and go to the frame data sheet for your character, you'll probably be horribly overwhelmed. There's a lot of numbers and letters, and none of it means anything to you at this point. If all of this is intimidating, the good news is that the Smash Club is just down the hall. The good news is that you can get incredibly far by using just 3 of the columns. These are the S column, which stands for startup frames, the OH column, which stands for on hit, and the OB column, which stands for on block. Startup is easy. It's just how fast the ouchy, hurty bit of the move comes out. When you press a button in fighting games, the move doesn't actually connect immediately in most cases. If I bring my controller up to the mic here and press standing heavy kick, you might notice that there's a gap in time in between when I press the button and when the move connects with Ken, like this. Bam, 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 bam. So every move takes time to get to its owie boo boo part, and that's expressed with startup frame. The on hit and on block columns are really similar to each other. They describe a time relationship between the characters after a move connects either on hit or on block. You can group moves together based on if they're plus on block, minus or negative on block, or even or 0 on block. We can demonstrate this by setting Ken to jump as soon as he can after blocking the move, like so. And we can have Ryu do the same by holding up so that he jumps immediately as soon as he can after the move animation ends, like so. Let's look at Ryu's forward heavy punch. This move is +3 on block. In other words, Ryu has a 3-frame advantage, which means that Ryu gets to move 3 frames before Ken after Ken blocks it. And this can be demonstrated with the jump setup that I have here. It's very slight, but you can notice a difference in the timing of the jumps. Ryu jumps first and lands first. We can try the same thing with Ryu's crouching medium kick, which is -6 on block. And you'll notice that Ken jumps first. And if we try a 0 on block move like Ryu's crouching medium punch, both characters have predictably jumped at the same exact time. Even the sound cue for jumping, it sounds like 1 sound cue instead of 2. Let's look closer at the on block situation. Like we've already established, Ryu's forward heavy punch is +3 on block, which means that he gets to act 3 frames before Ken if Ken blocks it. But instead of jumping, we could also, if we wanted to, press a button, like crouching light punch. But what if Ken also wanted to press crouching light punch right after the forward heavy punch? Crouching light punch for both Ryu and Ken have 4 frame startups, but since Ryu is +3 after forward heavy punch, his crouching light punch, and really all of his moves, start up 3 frames earlier than Ken's crouching light punch, and Ken gets counter hit. But crouching light punch is kind of a weak button in terms of damage. What if we instead choose to do something like forward heavy punch into regular standing heavy punch? As you can see, Ryu is the one that gets interrupted here, and that's because the plus frames of forward heavy punch and the startup of standing heavy punch leave too much of a gap. Ken is able to squeeze in a crouching light punch and hit Ryu out of his heavy punch startup, despite the fact that his heavy punch starts 3 frames before Ken can act. There's actually a really simple way to determine how fast a defender's move needs to be to interrupt a particular block string. We take the plus frames of the first move, in this case 3, and subtract it from the startup of the second move, in this case 10. So we get 7, which means that Ken has to use a move that starts up in less than 7 frames in order to interrupt the forward heavy punch, standing heavy punch block string. If he uses a move more than 7 frames, like his own 10 frames standing heavy punch, he gets hit out of it. If he uses a move with exactly 7 frames of startup, like his crouching medium kick, a trade occurs. And then of course, if he uses a move with less than 7 frames of startup, for example, his crouching medium punch starts up in 6, that interrupts, just like his crouching light punch. So to summarize, you take the second move's startup, then subtract the first move's frame advantage. If If the defender uses a move with a startup less than that result, they interrupt the block stream. If they use a move with more startup than that result, they get hit. And if the startup is equal to the result, a trade occurs. If we go back to the first forward heavy punch, crouching light punch example, you'll notice that 4 minus 3 is 1. So in theory, Ryu's crouching light punch will catch anything Ken has, since the fastest startup a move can have is 4 frames with little exception. However, if the defender isn't trying to instantly mash a button, in other words, they're trying to do a delay button in order to block the crouching light punch and to catch the walk forward throw, this strategy will only ever end flat for you, resetting the situation, so it's a good idea to go for the bigger gap sometimes. But the idea of going from plus frames into another move to catch a retaliation remains the same either way. So now we get to talk about what being minus on block means. When a move is minus on block, what can happen depends a lot on how minus the move is. If the move is anywhere from -1 to -3 on block, this move is considered safe. Your opponent doesn't get anything guaranteed here, but your offense stops and they get to try to start something, barring any sort of OD Dragon Punch shenanigans. Your opponent gets to act 1 to 3 frames earlier than you, similar to the plus on block situations described before, but the roles are reversed. One way to look at it is that you're basically starting a frame trap on yourself. Here's an example. Let's look at a situation where Ken blocks Ryu's light Hashigeki, which is -3 on block. A safe response from Ken would be to immediately throw out a 4-frame move like his crouching light punch. Since Ken's moves start up 3 frames earlier than yours do, even if you try to do your own crouching light punch, you'll get countered. The math here works the same from before with a few differences. You take the startup of the move Ken wants to do, subtract the absolute value of the on-block frames of your move, so in this case you're not subtracting -3, just regular 3, and if you use a move where the startup is more than the result, you'll get hit, and if it's less, you'll counter hit their move. So if Ken uses his crouching light punch, you get hit no matter what button you press. But if Ken has the absolute gall to try standing heavy punch instead, 10 frames of startup minus the 3 from light Hashigeki equals 7, you can catch him with, say, Ryu's 6-frame crouching medium punch. When a move is -4 or more on block, and by more I mean -5, -6, -7, etc., is what we call punishable on block. So blocking is impossible during a move animation. When a move is minus on block, the defending character can act before the attacker has gone through all of their attack animation. And so if the move is minus enough, the defender can retaliate and strike before the attacker can block. This results in a block punish. The math here is real simple. When a move is minus on block, it can be punished with a move that has a startup less than or equal to the absolute value of the minus on block frames. For example, I've set Ken to do his crouching heavy kick, aka his sweep, after blocking. It has an on-block value of -10. That means that Ryu can punish this on block with his own sweep, which works because it has a startup of 9, and 9 is less than 10. And you can tell it's a punish because of the punish counter text on the left side of the screen. If, however, I try to punish with something that has more than 10 frames, like Ryu's light hurricane kick, which starts up in 12 frames, it fails because 12 is obviously more than 10. Finally, let's go over some plus on hit situations. Things are different depending on how plus you are after hitting your opponent and the startup of the move you use after. If your plus frames are less than the startup frames of your next move, it's exactly like the plus on block situations discussed earlier. All the math is exactly the same, and the choices you can make are similar. The only difference being that the opponent takes a little bit of damage to start out. We can see this by doing forward medium punch, which is +3 on hit, into standing medium punch, which has 6 frames of startup, and setting Ken to do crouching light punch immediately after taking damage. Notice the counter hit when Ryu lands the crouching light punch. However, things get a little fun if your plus frames are more than or equal to the startup frames of the next move. You see, when you're plus on hit, the opponent is unable to block until those plus frames pass. In other words, if an attack is +5, the person getting hit can't do anything until after those 5 frames. Maybe you can think of it as blocking having a startup equal to the number of plus frames. All this means is if you have enough plus frames on hit and a quick enough move, the opponent can't do anything about the follow-up. This is the basis for combo links. You basically put the opponent in a reeling animation and then hit them again before the reeling animation ends. We can look at forward heavy punch again to see this in action. On hit, forward heavy punch is +6, and Ryu has several moves that start up with 6 frames or less, including crouching medium punch. You can see that it's a true combo because the combo counter on the left went up. 1, 2, 3. If we use something like standing heavy punch after, since its startup is more than 6, it fails to connect. So it's a good idea to make sure you're using the right moves to get the most damage. And that's it for the very basics of frame data. There's a lot more we could cover, like active and recovery frames, advantage on wake up, meaties, safe jumps, move properties, etc, etc. So if you'd like to see any of that, just yell at me in the comments down below. There are some things that are beyond the scope of this video, but still kind of relevant and pretty important to know, so I'll be putting some of that stuff in a pinned comment. If you want to do the YouTube things, it'd be very sexy of you, and if you have any questions or comments, let me know, and thank you for watching. Okay. Cool. That's it. Bye. Your opponent gets to act 1 to 3 frames earlier. Ugh, I can't do earlier. The math works the same here from before. The math here works the same before with a few differences. The math here works the same before. Oh my god. The math here works the same from before with a few differences.